Real esoteric spirituality without all of the fluff, without all of the nonsense. This is the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. Click subscribe and then hit the little bell button so that you can be notified whenever I've uploaded a video or when I'm doing the live Q&A videos. Hello, Thunder Wizards. I want to talk to you today some more about Odin's sacrifice on the Tree of Life. And I want to specifically talk to you about how Odin's sacrifice on the Tree of Life is a lesson in self-investment. Odin's sacrifice is very often misinterpreted. And that is understandable because we live in a society for the past, depending on where your ancestors are from, past 1,000 to 2,000 years, where we have been taught that spiritual sacrifice means sacrificing ourselves for the benefit of others. And this, of course, comes from the Jesus myth, where Jesus allowed himself. Listen to the words that I use. I use my words very carefully most of the time. Jesus allowed himself to be killed as a sacrifice for the spiritual evolution of others, assuming that you believe that Jesus existed. I do not. I believe that the Jesus character is a fictional, I'm not even going to say mythological, because for me, mythology has the same, a Christian would use the word scripture. I won't use that word, but for me, mythology is actually channeled information that has truth and value to it. So for me, the Jesus story is fictional. So you can now get an idea of how I look at that. I don't see the Jesus story as being helpful. So we live in a society where the idea of sacrifice, if you hear about a deity sacrificing him or herself, people immediately want to put that into the same category as Jesus sacrificing himself for others. There's a slight similarity to Prometheus. Prometheus didn't sacrifice himself. Prometheus stole knowledge from the gods and gave it to humans. And for that he was punished. And Zeus nailed him to a tree or something like that, and then an eagle would come every day and peck out his liver, and then every night his liver would regrow because he's a god, and then the next day. And this was until Hercules came and saved him from that. So that sometimes people want to confuse Prometheus with the Jesus fictional story and Odin, and they want to put them all together in these gods of sacrifice. Odin is nothing like either of those two, because there's an assumption in both of those that I find to be inaccurate. Now, I'm not an expert in Greek mythology, and if I were to spend enough time analyzing the myth of Prometheus, I might come to some conclusions. But my reaction to it right off the bat is something I don't resonate with, because it leaves the assumption that human beings, number one, are not capable of their own evolution. They need to have some god give it to them. The second thing I don't like about it is that it assumes that Zeus does not want human beings to evolve. So I have a problem with both of those assumptions. They both of those assumptions have the same assumption, which is that human beings are not qualified. They're not capable of their own evolution. I have an interesting viewpoint about Odin that has really pissed off a lot of people. I got a comment just yesterday or today about it. Because based on in the Voluspa, at least based, I don't know what it is in the original Old Norse because I'm not fluent in that. I know smatterings of it here and there. So I can't honestly say until I were fluent in that and I could look at it that I could really tell you. But based on the translations that I've read, there is some indication that Odin was not originally a celestial deity, that he was in fact a conscious being that through self-awareness became a celestial god, so much so that he became the head of the gods. And historically, that makes sense because the other Indo-European traditions, you can find all the other gods and goddesses in there, most of them. You can find Thor, which is Indra. You can find Tiw, which is Zeus and Jupiter. You can find, Mercury, which would be similar to Brage, right? So you can find the similarities among the gods, but Odin is unique to the Germanic tribes, and Odin is unique in all kinds of different ways. But in one of the verses of the Voluspa, it seems to indicate that from the train of dwarves that were molded into humanoid fashion by the celestial gods, there was, from that train of dwarves came three, Odin, Vili, and Ve. And so that leads me to believe that, and I like this idea about Odin. Odin is self-evolved. The reason why Odin is worshipped above all others is because he evolved himself, and he went even beyond the status of the gods. He went past them. So much so that they made him king of the gods. You don't see that in the Greek tradition, the Vedic tradition, the Latin tradition. You don't, which are all coming from that same root source. The language is very clear about that. You don't find Odin anywhere. You do see a correlation between Odin and Shiva, and Odin and Shiva seem to appear in the historical record around the same time. So that leads me to believe that the same kind of scenario was still happening, in that what we would call the Indo-European tradition is a living tradition. It lives and it grows and it evolves. And so you see that the spirits of the Indo-European tradition, you see them evolving in the two traditions that have, in my experience, the closest connection. But I think part of the reason for that is because of what was happening in the world at that time. So the other traditions that we have the Greek tradition and we have the Roman tradition. Now, what happened with the Greeks and the Romans? The Greeks and the Romans, before the so-called birth of Christ, before that, the whole Christian era came in, the Greeks and Romans became empires. And I think that empirical thinking really, I think that put a kibosh on the spiritual evolution of those people. Because I could get into that, it's a whole other thing, what the mindset of empires do to a population. But one of the things that comes out of the empire mindset is that you lose individuality. What becomes important is the empire, not the individual. The elites become important, and then the empire becomes important, but the individual is not important. We talk about that the Greeks gave us democracy, but the kind of democracy that we talk about, which is one vote, one person, one vote, man, woman, as long as you're above 18 years of age and you're a citizen, you have, your vote counts, supposedly. That's a democracy. That is not what the Greeks had. The Greeks had, a whole different thing. They had slaves. Of course, women couldn't vote. And there was an elite structure, all that. Same with the Roman Republic. It's interesting, the word Republican comes from the same word for the Roman Republic. The Roman Republic was an autocracy, an aristocracy. It was not a democracy. They had slaves and everything else. So our idea of democracy is not what was going on in the minds of the people who were running empires. Empires, again, you lose your individuality, and it's not about the self. Odin, his sacrifice is unique, at least from the sacrifices I'm aware of. I'm not an expert in every tradition that's ever existed, but at least in the ones that I've looked at, Odin's sacrifice is unique. And I would even go to say that the word sacrifice is probably the wrong word to use, because sacrifice, just the word sacrifice, means that you're giving yourself away to something else. You're sacrificing something, you're giving something up. And the point, as you can see in the title of this, is that the sacrifice of Odin was actually self-investment. Because what did Odin gain from that sacrifice? He died to himself. He died to himself, and through that death, he received the runes, the mysteries, and he became a magician. He gained access to the secrets of the universe. And to understand what that means, you have to understand the Indo-European, I'm talking about the ancient Indo-European tradition of sacred sound. It's not just symbolic. It's not just saying the runes are the secrets of the universe. They are the sounds that make up everything in the universe. And ancient Indo-European tradition understood that sound was magical, that sound created. And so for Odin to find the secrets of the universe, meaning he found the sounds that created the universe, the vowels and the consonants. And the runes represent the range of sounds that could be made in that language at that time. The reason why I don't use other forms of runes like the Anglo-Saxon Futhark or the younger Futhark is because those were not magical systems anymore. Those were alphabets based on the accent that was spoken at that time. So they had different, they had lost some vowels and some consonants and or gained some and all that. The Anglo-Saxon one is really interesting, but after a while it just gets confusing because there's just so many, there's so many, and some of them are so close to each other. I personally don't see the use for them. That's just me. So the idea is that the runes are not an arbitrary system. The runes are the base sounds from which all other sounds are derived. So when Odin found these, he found access to experience even more evolution of himself. So I want to focus on the idea of self-investment, because if you can comprehend the idea that self-sacrifice, which is, again, I want to get rid of that word altogether, that dying to yourself, even that, when you say dying to yourself, what comes to mind is still the Christianized idea of demoting your own ego, dropping your own aspirations for yourself, being, not being, lowering yourself, abasing yourself before God. Dying to yourself means, people say die to your ego. And all of that is a bunch of Christian garbage. Because true humility has nothing to do with debasing yourself. There is nothing humble about that. True humility says that you acknowledge the worth of everything, including yourself. If you are confident in yourself, then you have no need to debase yourself or aggrandize yourself. You don't need to compete with anybody else. You can appreciate what somebody has. If they have a skill you don't have, you can appreciate it because it's no threat to you. We get envious of other people because we want what they have, and so that's when people get into, I'm better than you nonsense. But those are people who don't have too much ego, they have too little ego. So those are the only options. You either have the right amount of ego or you don't have enough. If you don't have enough ego, there are two extremes that you are going to express. One is you're going to become a doormat, a victim, or you're going to become an opinionated, egotistical asshole. But that's just somebody who's insecure. If you're secure, you have no need to compete, and you have no need to not acknowledge somebody else's achievements and go, wow, that's really great that they did that. Good for them. And then you can, I have had throughout my life, I've had an interesting reaction to things. And I found out later that there's a type of personality that does this. And apparently I have one of these personality types. And that is, whenever I see somebody do something that I can't do, I say to myself, if that person can do it, I can do it. Now, I may or may not, reach the level of success that they do, but that opens me up to go out and go after it. And I have been able to accomplish a lot of things and achieve mastery in some things simply because I had that belief. Even though it was like I could tell they were so far ahead of me. I was like, they did it. If they did it, I can do it. So I'm going to go after it. That's the mindset of Odin. Odin had to have had that mindset. And, it's obvious that what he wanted was whatever the runes end up giving to him. I'm not clear from the mythology that he knew that the runes existed. He knew that something existed. There's some other symbology we need to look at. Odin was pierced with a spear. So we need to know what the spear signifies. We've talked about this before, but I'll share it again. The spear represents the spinal column. Specifically, it represents what the Vedics would call Kundalini. The name for spear in the Vedic is Shakti. Shakti comes from the root to shake. And so when people according to a lot of people who've had this experience, this wasn't my experience when it's happened, but this is other people's experience. When the Kundalini awakens in the spinal column, they feel the spine shake. They feel their whole body shake. So Odin's weapon is the spear, which means the spinal column, which means the Kundalini. If you don't know what Kundalini is, let's talk about that. There are two general types of life force energy that we deal with when we do energy practice. By the way, let me just state, anybody listening, when I put this back up on the YouTube channel, anybody listening to me, if you really want to get something out of what I teach, you've got to do the energy work. This is a path of experience. If all you're doing is coming onto my channel and listening to me talk, you're getting 2% of what you're meant to get from this path. So when I talk about things like Kundalini, and when I talk about things like life force energy, I'm expecting you to have an experience with that, because this bears repeating. This life is an experience. First and foremost, this life is an experience. This life is not meant to be thought about. It's meant to be experienced. The philosophy that comes as a result of spiritual practice is just simply a way to try and put into words what cannot be put into words. Philosophy is that. And so if spirituality to you means sitting with a bunch of people and talking about things, then you and I are on two different wavelengths. So when I talk about things like Kundalini and prana, chi, ond, atham, whatever words you want to use, it's because I want to live that experience. Knowledge and wisdom is a result of experience. It's not a result of reading books or watching videos. I'll just give you an example. There's one thing that I keep seeing popping up on YouTube, which I just find the silliest among silly, which is when people want to talk about exiting the matrix, there will people will say, yes, the exit to the matrix is at the North Pole. And I'm thinking to myself, if I really believed that, if I really believed I was trapped inside of a matrix and that there was an exit to it, that if I went through that exit, I would no longer be trapped, and that as long as I got to that exit and got through it, then I'd be free, there would be nothing in the world to stop me from getting. Wouldn't matter where it was. So I find it interesting that the one place that they say it is the hardest place to get to. I mean, you can get to the South Pole a lot easier because it's on a continent. It's still extremely difficult and unlikely, but you can get there. It's a hell of a lot harder to get to the North Pole, because the North Pole is going to be somewhere, if lucky, if we're still lucky, an ice block floating in the middle of the ocean at the top of the world. And how many people, it's just too convenient. The one place that is the most difficult place to get to on the planet is the magical exit. And people just take that at face value. Oh yeah, I heard it's obviously these are people who live in their heads. They have no interest in exiting. No interest. Because if they did, somebody would have gone up there with a camera and would have been filming it. Look, there's the exit right there. I'm filming it. Come here. Here are the coordinates. And there would be a line of people, and somebody would be charging money to take you on a boat and drop you off and let you fall through the exit. So they know that there is no such fucking thing. Because these are people who live in their heads. These are people who think that spirituality is something we read about and talk about. Just like Christianity. What is Christianity? You go to church and you listen to the preacher. Before Christianity, there wasn't a preacher. There wasn't going to a service and listen to somebody preach. There was going to the temple and doing rituals. And then maybe you would go and somebody would share with you, you know, a mythology, and you would listen to the mythology. But nobody preached at you. It's because that is a religion of the intellect, and the intellect means nothing except trying to figure out how to practically apply your experience. I'll say it again. Your intellect means nothing except as a device for you to practically apply your experience. Your experience is what you feel, what you personally connect to. And that's, you know, one of the reasons that I do the things that I do, surf, hike in the mountains, is because it allows me an experience of this place we live called Earth. So Odin is a god of experience. Odin is not a god of the intellect. Odin is a god of experience. And if you want to understand Odin, you have to experience what he experienced. Not like Jesus, where you just simply have to intellectually believe. That's all you have to do. A stupid religion. How stupid is that? The only thing you have to do to gain access to infinity is to just simply intellectually believe something that you have zero evidence for and has no practical relevance to your life. Unless you're a victim and you want somebody to come and save you from your misery. In that case, it has a practical application. You know, but you know, to get to that place where you're so miserable, you have such a lack of belief in yourself and a lack of trust in the universe that, you know, you have to have somebody come in and save you, or you have to have somebody tell you there's an exit at the North Pole, and yet you don't put any effort to going there. Anyway, I'm getting kind of off topic here. So I want to talk to you about changing the word of self-sacrifice and dying to oneself into a new phrase, which is self-investment. I'm thinking about this today because, well, three reasons. Number one, I am in the process of doing a lot of self-investment. I'm changing a lot of things. I'm liquidating a lot of things. I'm having to spend a lot of money on a lot of stuff. As you know, my plan is to get rid of everything that I have, get out of my lease in my house, get out of my car lease. You know, it means that I've either got to take a hit of a couple $1,000s because it's still a new vehicle, or you know, find somebody to take the lease over for me. I'm going to be walking away from, you know, as far as what California can provide me with, you know, my fantasy place. I'm not really satisfied here in California anymore. So walking away from all of my security. I've spent a ton of money on things like plane tickets and places to live, you know, places to rent while I'm in Australia. And my plan is to spend, I don't know, we'll see, but maybe a year and a half bouncing between Australia and New Zealand for a year and a half to do some surfing, to live on the beach and do some surfing and, you know, continue to do what I'm doing. Costs a lot of money to do that, and I'm starting to come up against it. I've actually, you know, spent a good chunk of money, and there's some debt hanging in front of me, you know, credit card debt and stuff like that, and I still have to pay my taxes, which I haven't done. So I'm in the process of living what I'm sharing with you, which is, you know, I'm going to have to invest in myself financially. I'm going to have to risk, because, you know, anything can happen. I could end up in Australia and, you know, what if my business starts to taper off? I'm going to be kind of screwed. I will have spent a ton of money. I'll be in another country. I won't have any place to come home to. I won't even have a car. You know, I'll have to get back on a plane and stay in a hotel or something. So I'm investing in myself. Now, I do this because I've seen in the past, every time that I wanted a huge change in my life, I have always jumped off the cliff and taken huge risks. And they have been big financial risks. And it's always paid off for me, every single time. And so I'm likening that to Odin's sacrifice of himself. What did he do? He died to himself. He sacrificed himself to himself. He invested in himself. And it cost him. I'm thinking of 3 people that I talked to in the past 48 hours, either on the phone or through emails or something else, where people want something in their lives that they believe will help them to propel them forward in their life, but it will cost them money. And I found myself saying to them, listen, if it's something that you want, you ask yourself this question: if I didn't have to worry about money, would I want that thing? And if the answer is yes, then you go get it. You go pay for it. If you don't pay for it, you're not going to get it. And that old saying of you get what you pay for. Spirituality is no different. Now, I'm not saying you have to pay money, but you're going to have to pay something. People talk about spiritual apprenticeship. And, again, there is those people who want to argue with me about I shouldn't charge for teaching and all that kind of stuff, which, by the way, just let me be clear that I have a free YouTube channel that has, I don't even know how many, 450 free videos with free meditation, free qigong, free mantra, free ritual, free teaching on it. So the majority of my teaching that's out there is free. But if people want my time, or they want something that I think is of real value, I require that they sacrifice for that. It has to cost them something. And in fact, in my experience, when it comes to spiritual knowledge, like something of real value, especially if it's a practice that you have to learn, that takes time to be taught, the more that it hurts your sacrifice for that, the more you're going to gain from it. I've seen this not only in my practice early on, and in the early days, I used to teach for almost nothing, and I would teach high-level spiritual techniques and martial arts for almost nothing. And it was frustrating because nobody ended up sticking with it. I myself paid a lot of money to my teachers to learn the high-level martial arts and stuff that had a huge amount of value. But what ended up happening is, because I invested in it, I was going to get every penny that I put into it. I was going to get something out of it. So I practiced it. I made sure that I learned it. There were other people, in my satellite sphere who learned the same techniques and the same martial art techniques and forms and those kinds of things, qigong and energy work, who didn't pay for it, who ended up coming back a year, 2 years later and asking the teacher, hey, can you teach that high level set to me again? I forgot it. In which case the teacher said, no, no, I spent a week teaching you that. I gave it to you for free. And now and you didn't bother, you didn't value it enough to memorize it? I'm not going to teach it to you again. You had your chance. But if you pay for it, you're sure as hell gonna remember it. You're gonna write it down. You're gonna film it. You're gonna make sure that you remember it, if it's of any value to you. So I'm not trying to make this all about paying money for things. That's just the symbol. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to switch the way you look at the idea of sacrifice. And we've got to get out of the victim mentality. I keep wanting to get specific, but I don't want to point fingers at anybody. But, this is why I seemingly have I seemingly have no sympathy for people who come to me who, want something from me, but they want to give me a sob story about why they can't, follow through, either by payment or with action. I don't have any sympathy for you. The path of Odin is a path of investment. You have to invest, and you have to be willing to die for that investment. Again, if we go back to the understanding of, or the belief that in the North Pole there is the exit to the matrix. What value is that belief? I haven't yet, to this day, I have not found anybody who has come onto YouTube and said either, I have just sold everything that I have and I'm going on a trek to the North Pole, and we never hear from him again. He died on the way, or he found the exit. Or somebody said, yes, I've been to the North Pole, I saw the exit, here are the photographs, I haven't seen that yet. Maybe I haven't looked hard enough. But what that tells me is that those people don't really believe that. It's not of value to them. What the value of that belief is, it keeps them stuck in their victim mentality. You see the world this and the world that and blah, 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 and exit the matrix, and I'm a victim. Odin's sacrifice was no picnic. He died to himself. He died. And as I read the myth, he didn't know what was on the other side. He didn't know what he was going to get for that. He just knew that he had to sacrifice himself for the knowledge that he wanted. And it says that the result of that is that the runes appeared before him, and it says, screaming, he took them up. Screaming. He didn't go, oh yes, now I've reached enlightenment. There was such an intense desire to achieve what the runes did for him that when they appeared, he screamed as he reached out for them. So I would have respect for, not that I wish physical death on anybody, I don't. But I would have respect for somebody if they truly honestly believed that the exit to the matrix was at the North Pole. If they said, you know what, that's more important to me than anything, and if I die trying to get there, then so be it. It's better than living in this, this matrix. That's the mindset you have to be like Odin. That's the mindset. You have to be willing to die. This is why our ancestors said you have to be willing to die in battle. Battle for what? Whatever it is that you want. It's an investment. This is a rule of how the world works. This is the underlying assumption of everything that I teach. Pick any one of my teachings or any one of my video teaching courses, and you're going to find the same underlying assumption, which is you have to be willing to die in order to get it. I could keep making more examples, but the five rules to master the matrix. 5 rules to master the matrix is one of my teachings that says that the universe responds when you take fearless action towards what you want. Fearless action, fearless doesn't, the word fearless isn't meaningless. You apply the word fearless towards something that should give you fear. Because if it doesn't give you fear, just because you feel confident, that doesn't make you fearless. I mean, getting up and walking into the next room, there's not a whole lot of danger in there. So I can't say I fearlessly got up and walked into the kitchen and got myself a tea. No. I fearlessly walked past the crouching, hungry lion who stood between me and my children, and I fearlessly went past them to save my children. That's what the word fearless means. That there's a real chance that you're not going to make it. Dying in battle, fearlessly dying in battle. So being willing to fearlessly go after what you want means that assumes that there's going to be the chance that you will be destroyed in the process. Fearlessly. What I teach is that when you act with fearlessness, then and only then does the universe respond. It responds to your actions, not to your thoughts, not to your intellectual beliefs. The only real intellectual belief that you can work on is trusting. Trust that if you take action, you will be rewarded. Trust that if you invest and it hurts, you will be rewarded. And I'm going over this because I'm going to contrast it with the mindset that we have now. The mindset that we have now is, well, I'll do that when I get the money. Like, let's take the escaping the matrix. If the exit to the matrix is at the North Pole, and somebody wants to do that, they might say to me, well, yeah, I plan on doing that, but I'm going to wait until I get enough money. Well, how are you going to get the money? Well, I'm going to go work this job. Well, isn't working this job being stuck in the matrix? How can being stuck in the matrix help you exit the matrix? Isn't money just another illusion of the matrix? So you're telling me you're going to go deeper into the matrix in order to exit the matrix? This is the thought process behind, well, I can't go live my passion yet. I have to make some more money. When I make enough money, then I'll go do it. It never works that way. Odin didn't do that. Odin didn't sit around and say, when I win the lottery, I'll go sacrifice myself for the runes. He didn't even know the runes existed. Getting back to the spear. The spear is Shakti. The spear is Shakti. What is it what did I discover? That the name of Odin's spear means the swayer. Because when you shake a spear, it sways back and forth. That's why the Vedics call the spear Shakti, the thing you shake. Because that's what in case you don't remember what I said last time, is that in ancient times, it wasn't sword and shield. Sword and shield was probably the second or the third phase of the battle. The first phase of the battle is you showed up with a spear. And watching recreationists who, like battle recreationists, when you give a spear to somebody who isn't trained, in other words, you just grab somebody off the street and give them a spear and say, go up against those guys with a sword and shield. It's something like, 75% of the time, the guy with no skills who has a spear will win. The spear is a much more effective weapon than a sword and a shield. And, so it's this is telling you how powerful this weapon is. And so the Odin's spear, I believe, is called the swayer, because when you've got this whole army of guys who may have a sword in here and they may have whatever, they may have a shield, they first show up with the spear. And you have all these lines of people with spears, and they start to shake the spear. And if you've ever heard it, something like that, you can do it with a broomstick or anything that's long enough. It starts to go, especially if it has a sharp, point at the end of it as it cuts through the air. Imagine if you've got 10,000, 20,000 men all shaking their spear. The sound is going to be deafening. It's going to be very frightening. And that sound would have been frightening to the other side. This is what it means. Odin has the spear, the swayer, that which sways. And Odin, one of Odin's name is the terrible, the fearsome. And so this means that you go up against an army of doubt, fear, insecurity, self-sabotage, disbelief, lack of trust. This is the army that you are facing, that you take your spear and you shake your spear at that enemy. Because what is Kundalini? I was going to tell you earlier. What is Kundalini? Kundalini is the spiritual energy that comes up through the spine, which opens up when it comes and hits one of the chakras, the energy centers. The energy centers open. This means that you become mature in whatever that chakra is about. Root chakra is about possessions and security. Second chakra is about the first level of interrelationship and creativity. The third one is about power and your fearlessness. The fourth one, the heart, is about opening yourself up to others, and then you learn through that how to let others be themselves. The fifth one is about speaking your truth. Sixth one is about understanding the unity of all things, and the top one here I couldn't even begin to tell you because I don't know if I've gotten there yet. But what I can tell you is that when your Kundalini rises to that and that center opens, you mature on that level. So the Kundalini is about psychological maturity, psychological awareness. Odin is a god of psychological awareness, and he shakes his spear. He shakes your spinal column. If you worship Odin, he is going to awaken you on the psychological level. And true psychology is not just intellectually talking about the unconscious and the superconscious. That doesn't mean shit. Those are ways of putting into words an experience. True psychology is a spiritual awareness. In fact, the word psychology, I'll write it out here for you. Psychology is a Greek word which means the best way to translate it is science. Science of the soul. Now that's probably not what you were expecting. Psyche. Psyche is the Greek word for soul. Logia means the study of or the body of knowledge. So psychologia is the body of knowledge concerning the soul. Not the brain, not even the emotions. That psychology, the understanding of our emotional being, is an energetic spiritual experience. Odin is a god of psychological experience, self-awareness. Self-awareness is not sitting, in full lotus and going, yes, I'm a human. That is not self-awareness. That is one of the tools that we use to achieve self-awareness, but that is not self-awareness. Self-awareness is knowing all of the garbage in your unconscious mind. Knowing all of the garbage in your unconscious mind and knowing how you made decisions based on your fears and based on your experiences in order to sabotage yourself. That's what psychology is all about. Psychology is the same experience that religion has been trying to poke at. Buddhism comes very close. Buddhism comes very close. But as soon as you start to get there, then people get stuck in their head. So this idea of self-awareness that we think we're hearing from when we hear people talk about Jesus' sacrifice and dying to yourself and dying to the ego, all of that nonsense is all about denying your experience. The most spiritual state of being there is. There is a state of enlightenment. A state of enlightenment is nothing more than being fully connected to all of your thoughts and your feelings, all of your drives and desires, feeling them, having them, and taking constructive action. That's all enlightenment ever will be. That's all it is. So any form of enlightenment that people want to share with you where you reach this place of no feeling, and I'm now enlightened and I'm no longer, that is nothing more than denial. Or, the idea that, well, we're in this state of bliss, and when you get to this state of bliss, then you're at one with everything. I have to say, some of the most annoying people are people who are just blissed out all the time because they're so full of shit. They are so in denial. I appreciate people who, in any relationship, like romantic relationship, any true romantic relationship, you're going to get into an argument. There's going to be a time where you're going to be really angry. And there's going to be a time when you hate your partner. And women have looked at me strange, but when I see that they're upset, I want to sit down and talk to them. I'll say, let's talk. That's, no, I don't want to fight. I'm like, I'm not going to fight with you. I want you to be able to look me in the eyes and tell me that you hate my guts right now. As long as you don't start attacking me and calling me names and throwing things at me and accusing me of things, I can listen to your feelings. And then I'll ask you, well, what is it that I did? Why are you feeling that way? And then we can resolve it. And I say, if you can look me in the face and do that, I'll marry you. Because then I know that you will have the ability to act constructively regardless of your feeling. And that's the biggest thing. Think about it. When it comes to relationships, what's the biggest problem? The biggest problem is that people act on their emotions in a way that you experience as being destructive. What is it we teach little kids? Ideally. Kids say, I hate you. You go, I know, but you still can't have a cookie. We don't let their feelings dictate how we act towards them, nor do we hate them back. We let them have their feelings. That's enlightenment. We can do that with little kids. We can do it with animals. We can't do it with people we see as equals. So good. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So those are some of my thoughts about Odin's sacrifice. I'll see if there are any questions here. Stephen Purdy, greetings. I wanted to share a short dream where I watched you defeat me Kung Fu style from outside of myself. Okay. I don't know what to do with that. Stephen Purdy, question. I believe Gungnir was Odin's spirit. Yes, Gungnir. It means swaying one. Yes. Can we call Kundalini the swaying one? What would that mean? Well, I think I answered that. The swaying is the spinal column. The spinal column sways. So that's the spear. The spear is, so the Kundalini isn't the swaying one. The spinal column sways as a result of the Kundalini rising. So the Kundalini isn't the swaying one. Kundalini means lock of hair or something like that. Because it wraps around, in its dormant state is wrapped around the base of the spine. And it uncoils. That's why it's referred to as a snake, because it uncoils and then goes up the spine, and then we experience the spine shaking, swaying. Okay, that's it for the questions. All right, no more questions. So here's what I recommend. Once again, if you haven't already done it, look, if you want to get the most out of what I'm teaching, it means you have to, number one, know what I teach. So I recommend that you get the books, you read the books. I recommend that you do the practices that are on the channel. Do them. I want you to honestly ask yourself, if you've been coming on my channel regularly, What is the majority of time that you spend? Is it in listening to me talk, or is it in doing the exercises that I've given and laid out? If you're going to get something out of this channel, at some point you're going to have to do that. And then let me tell you something. If you start doing the practices, then go back and listen to me talk again. You've heard me say something, you're going to hear on deeper levels things that you didn't hear the first time around. Because I'm talking on multiple levels. I string my stories together to achieve something. That's why it sounds like sometimes I'm going off on different directions. I'm coming back around. And if you listen, I'll start with something and then I'll take us down a circuitous path and then I'll take us to a conclusion most of the time. Sometimes I don't, but I do that for a reason. I'm trying to shift your awareness. The 4 tools that I recommend. People have been asking me, where do I start with your teaching? Where do I go? There's so much info. Okay, so I narrowed it down. There are 4 tools that you need to get the most out of this path. First one is you need to know what your destination is. For the people who want to get out of the matrix, their destination is the North Pole. Now you need to know what your destination is, and you need a map. So you need a map to get to the North Pole in order to exit the matrix. So that is the first one. And that is what I call find your perfect career. Career is what it sounds like, but it is also more than that. Because a true career is the universe pays you money to be yourself. So you have to find out who you are. That's your exit. You have to know who you are. So that's the first one, the first tool. Second tool is now that you know that the exit to the matrix is at the North Pole, you need a vehicle to get you there. So to get to the North Pole, you're going to need a car and a plane and a boat. And you're going to need power to fuel your vehicle. That is life force energy. Life force energy is consciousness. You can't separate life force energy from consciousness. You can't do it. So the point I'm making with that is the reason why I'm telling people they have to do life force energy if they want to get something out of it is because it will not only give you the experience of energy and power and googly whatever, it will also increase your consciousness. So you have to have power to get to your destination. That's the Qigong, the celestial Qigong. Third one, you need to know the rules of the road. You're going to have to know how to navigate your ship. You're going to have to know how to fly your plane through the air and where you can go and what to do and who to say this and what that. You're going to need to know how to drive your vehicle on the road, which side of the road, what are the rules of the road. You're going to need to know the rules of the road. That's the 5 rules to master the matrix. If you understand the 5 rules to master the matrix will not trap you. It will reward you for taking actions, and you don't have to think it. You can just take specific actions based on what I tell you. The universe will respond in a very specific way, which will give you the resources you need to achieve what you want. The 4th tool is what we're doing now. Coming up in a little over a week, I will have my live YouTube streaming rights again, and I'm going to start doing the live YouTube Q&As on the thunderwizard.com YouTube channel. And then I am also going to be doing live question and answers for the Patreon channel for those people who are signed up for the Manifestation Mastery course. So that's the 4th one. And I do that for a reason, because if you are following, if you have read the books, if you are doing the exercises, as well as coming on and listening to me talk, if you are doing that, you probably have a lot of questions. You probably have very specific questions that you would like to have me address. So the live Q&As, I'll answer you in real time about very specific questions and techniques to help you achieve what you want. So for that, you're going to go to neo.thunderwizard.com. neo.thunderwizard.com. I strongly recommend you get the most out of it. I get frustrated I get frustrated with people who don't invest in themselves. I get frustrated with people who say they want to expand their knowledge, they want to learn more, but they won't invest in themselves. Frustrates me. It frustrates me because I want to share with you my experience of life. And my experience of life has been a continuous investment in myself. Whenever I've achieved anything, it's always been I've invested something: time, money, sweat, blood, sometimes all of the above. And that's how I know that when you act fearlessly, the universe provides you with resources. I didn't know that. Nobody taught me that before. I know that because I've done it. And so that's why I can state to you there's 5 rules to master the matrix. Because that's what my experience has done for me. It's not written in some book somewhere. Nobody spoke it to me in my ear. Just from experience. All right, so that's it for me today. I think we're all done. Yeah, no more. All right, no more questions. So that's it. I will see you guys very soon. And yeah, there you go. All right, talk to you later.